I'm Brielle Hartman, 32, and I never thought my family's annual Thanksgiving dinner would end with me exposing a decade of lies, my brother's fraudulent business, and my parents' complicity in his schemes. As I stood there watching their perfectly crafted image crumble around them, I realized that sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you deserve. And karma was just getting started. Before I dive into this wild family drama, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, and while you're there, hit that subscribe button to join our storytelling family. If you've ever felt like the black sheep while someone else was the golden child, this family revenge drama will show you exactly why patience pays off. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for the justice that's about to be served. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, the contrast between how my parents treated my older brother Logan and me was stark and painful. From our earliest memories, Logan was the golden child, celebrated for every minor achievement while my accomplishments were barely acknowledged. When Logan scored the winning touchdown at his high school football game, my parents threw an extravagant party inviting half the neighborhood. When I was accepted to Brown University with a partial scholarship in computer science, my father's response was, "At least you got some financial aid." My mother merely added, "Logan got a full ride to Yale, as if I needed the reminder." Our childhood home was plastered with Logan's trophies, certificates, and photographs. My academic awards were tucked away in a drawer, occasionally brought out when my parents needed to appear as though they supported both their children equally. "We're so proud of both our kids," my mother would say at social gatherings right before launching into a 10-minute monologue about Logan's latest achievement. By the time I graduated college, I'd learned to expect the disparate treatment. I'd secured an entry-level position at a promising tech startup, while Logan had leveraged our father's connections to land a job at a prestigious financial firm in Manhattan. "Logan's starting salary is 6 figures," my father announced, proudly at my graduation dinner. A dinner that was supposed to celebrate my achievement. The pattern continued into our adult lives. Logan married Vanessa, a woman from a wealthy family with the right connections. Their wedding was an extravagant affair at the Plaza Hotel with my parents sparing no expense. 2 years later, when I married Daniel, a dedicated high school teacher, my parents contributed the bare minimum, commenting that teachers don't exactly have the most impressive career trajectory. Throughout my 20s, I worked diligently at my career, gradually climbing the ranks in the tech industry. Daniel and I lived frugally in a modest apartment, saving carefully for our future. Meanwhile, Logan and Vanessa moved into an upscale neighborhood, drove luxury cars, and took lavish vacations that they flaunted on social media. My parents shared and commented on every post, gushing with pride about their successful son. The disparity became even more pronounced when Logan announced he was launching his own investment firm. My father, a retired investment banker, not only provided substantial seed money but also connected Logan with his former clients. "Your brother is building something substantial," my father told me during a rare phone call. "He's making a name for himself. What about you, still at that little tech company?" What my parents didn't know, or perhaps chose to ignore, was that I had been developing a revolutionary cybersecurity algorithm on the side. I'd been working nights and weekends for years, pouring my heart and soul into creating something that could change the digital security landscape. Daniel had been my rock, encouraging me when I hit roadblocks and believing in my vision even when I doubted myself. When I finally secured a patent for my algorithm and attracted interest from major tech companies, I called my parents, eager to share my success. My mother answered, sounding distracted. "That's nice, honey," she said, after I explained my achievement. "Did you hear Logan just bought a 4-bedroom mansion in Greenwich? They're having a housewarming next month. You should come." That conversation was a turning point for me. I realized that no matter what I achieved, my parents would always see me through the lens they had created. Logan was the successful one, and I was the disappointment. What hurt most wasn't their favoritism. It was their inability to see me for who I really was and what I had accomplished on my own merit, without their support or connections. Daniel saw the pain in my eyes after that call. He held me as I finally allowed myself to cry over the family dynamic that had shaped so much of my self-perception. "Your worth isn't determined by their approval, Brielle," he whispered. "You've built something amazing and you did it all on your own. That's something they can never take away from you." With Daniel's support, I made a decision that day. I would no longer seek my parents' validation or approval. I would live my life, celebrate my successes, and build my future based on my values and aspirations. I didn't know it then, but this mental shift would prepare me for the storm that was coming. A storm that would reveal the truth behind Logan's supposed success and my parents' blind devotion to their golden child. The invitation to Logan and Vanessa's housewarming party arrived in the mail, an expensive cream-colored card with gold embossing announcing their new address in Greenwich's most exclusive neighborhood. The accompanying note from my mother made it clear that attendance wasn't optional. "Your father and I expect you both there. Family supports family, Brielle." Daniel looked at me uncertainly as I read the note aloud. "Are you sure you want to go? We could make up an excuse." I shook my head, fingering the thick cardstock. "No, I think we should attend. Besides, I'm curious to see this mansion they've been bragging about." The truth was, something didn't add up about Logan's rapid ascent. I'd been monitoring the financial news as part of my job, and while Logan's firm was mentioned occasionally, the reported successes didn't seem substantial enough to fund the lifestyle he and Vanessa were flaunting. Logan had always been charming and persuasive traits that had helped him navigate social situations and impress our parents, but running a successful investment firm required more than charm. The weekend of the housewarming, Daniel and I drove to Greenwich. As we pulled up to the imposing gate of Logan's new property, I felt a familiar knot of inadequacy forming in my stomach. The house was exactly as my mother had described. A Georgian-style mansion with manicured grounds and a circular driveway where luxury cars were already parked. "Remember, we're just here to make an appearance," Daniel squeezed my hand reassuringly. "We don't have to stay long." Inside the house was a showcase of wealth. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, designer furniture that looked like it had never been sat on. Vanessa greeted us with air kisses, her diamond earrings catching the light as she moved. "Brielle, so glad you could make it. Love that dress. Is it from last season's collection?" Before I could respond, Logan appeared, clapping Daniel on the shoulder. "Teacher Howe's shaping young minds going, still driving that Honda." His laugh was loud, designed to draw attention to show others he was making a joke at my husband's expense. I bit back a retort, reminding myself we were just here to make an appearance. We followed them through the house as they gave us the grand tour, pointing out imported fixtures and custom features. Logan spoke about the house as if it were a trophy proof of his success. "The realtor said it's the most impressive property sold in Greenwich this year," he boasted. "Only the best for the Hartman legacy, right?" My parents arrived shortly after us, making a grand entrance. My mother immediately attached herself to Logan and Vanessa, parading around the party as they greeted guests together. My father made his way to the bar where he held court with several older gentlemen who I recognized as his former colleagues. I was getting a glass of water in the kitchen when I overheard a conversation between two men I didn't recognize. "Returns seem too good to be true," one was saying quietly. I mentioned it to my financial advisor, and he raised some red flags about Hartman's operation. "But Charles is invested heavily with him," the other replied, referring to my father. "Said his son's a financial genius." "Or something else entirely," the first man muttered before they noticed me and quickly changed the subject. That conversation planted a seed of suspicion that I couldn't shake. During dinner, as everyone gathered around the massive dining table, I watched Logan more carefully. He was performing There was no other word for it. His animated stories about market predictions and investment strategies sounded rehearsed, and he deflected whenever anyone asked specific questions about his firm's portfolio or investment approach. The secret to my success, Logan raised his glass when someone asked directly. Intuition and connections. Right, Dad. He winked at our father, who beamed with pride. After dinner, my mother cornered me in the hallway. "Isn't this magnificent?" she gushed, gesturing around. "Your brother has done so well for himself. You must be so proud." "It's certainly impressive," I replied carefully. "Logan's firm must be doing exceptionally well to afford all this so quickly." My mother's smile faltered slightly. "Well, he's always had a gift for finance. Like your father." "Yes, but even Dad took decades to build his wealth. Logan's only been running his firm for 3 years." My mother's expression hardened. "What exactly are you implying, Brielle? Can't you just be happy for your brother instead of questioning his success?" "I'm not implying anything, Mom. I'm just curious about how the investment world works these days." I kept my tone light, but I could see the discomfort in her eyes. As the evening wore on, I found myself observing the dynamics of the party with new awareness. Logan was the center of attention. My parents were his proud supporters, and the guests were either impressed by or suspicious of his rapid success. Daniel and I remained on the periphery, watching the performance unfold. Just before we were planning to leave, Logan called for everyone's attention. Standing on the grand staircase with Vanessa by his side and my parents beaming below, he made an announcement. "Vanessa and I are thrilled to share that we're expecting." The room erupted in applause and congratulations. And Logan continued once the noise died down, "We're planning to expand the Hartman Investment Group. We're launching a new fund next month that's going to revolutionize the industry." My father raised his glass. "To the next generation of Hartmans, both the baby and the business." As glasses clinked around the room, I noticed a strange expression cross Vanessa's face, a flicker of what looked like panic or concern before her practiced smile. I returned. It was so brief I almost missed it, but it confirmed my growing suspicion that there was more to Logan's success story than my family was admitting. On our drive home, I shared my observations with Daniel. "Something's not right with Logan's business," I concluded. "The way he avoids specific questions, the whispers from those men," Vanessa's reaction to the announcement. "I think he might be running some kind of scheme." Daniel glanced at me, concern evident in his eyes. "That's a serious suspicion, Brielle. What are you going to do?" "I'm going to do what I do best," I replied, a plan already forming in my mind. "I'm going to investigate. If Logan's doing something illegal, people could get hurt, including our parents, who seem heavily invested in his firm." What I didn't say to Daniel was that part of me, a small hurt part that I wasn't proud of, wanted to find evidence that Logan's success was built on lies. After years of being compared unfavorably to my brother, there would be a certain vindication in discovering that the golden child's achievements were fraudulent. But the larger part of me was genuinely concerned. If Logan was operating a Ponzi scheme or engaging in financial fraud, innocent people would lose their savings. And my parents, blinded by their favoritism and pride, might lose everything. The Monday after the housewarming party, I took a day off from work to begin my investigation into Logan's business dealings. As a cybersecurity specialist, I had developed skills that would prove useful. I knew how to research, analyze patterns, and find information that others preferred to keep hidden. I set up my laptop at our dining table, a notebook beside me to jot down findings. "I still think you should be careful," Daniel said as he prepared to leave for school that morning. "Even if Logan is doing something sketchy, he's still your brother, and exposing him would devastate your parents." "If he's defrauding people, they deserve to know the truth," I replied, though Daniel's concern gave me pause. Was I motivated by justice or resentment? Besides, if he's caught by the authorities first, it could be worse for everyone. Daniel kissed my forehead. Just remember why you're doing this. It's about protecting people, not settling old scores. Once alone, I began by researching Logan's firm, Hartman Investment Group. The company website was sleek and professional, featuring impressive but vague descriptions of their investment strategy and photographs of Logan shaking hands with various business leaders. The About Us page mentioned innovative market approaches and exclusive investment opportunities, but provided little concrete information about their specific methods. Next, I searched financial news sites and investment forums for mentions of the firm. There were a few press releases announcing the company's formation 3 years ago and subsequent fund launches, but surprisingly little substantive coverage for a firm that was supposedly so successful. On investment discussion boards, I found mixed opinions. Some posters reported impressive returns, while others expressed skepticism about the firm's secrecy and Logan's reluctance to discuss specific investments. By midday, I'd compiled enough basic information to know I needed to dig deeper. Using my professional connections, I reached out to a former colleague who now worked at the Securities and Exchange Commission. "Hey, Brielle, long time no talk," Marcus said when he called me back. "What can I help you with?" "I'm researching investment firms for potential collaboration," I lied, feeling a twinge of guilt. "Have you heard anything about Hartman Investment Group?" There was a pause on the line. "Hartman. Run by Logan Hartman, any relation?" "He's my brother," I admitted. "But this is strictly professional." Marcus hesitated before responding. "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but since it's family, there have been some flags raised about that firm. Nothing concrete enough for a formal investigation yet, but they're on our radar. The returns they're reporting are consistently above market average, even during downturns. That's either financial genius or something else." I finished recalling the conversation I'd overheard at the party. "Exactly. And their client acquisition pattern is typical of certain types of schemes. Lots of friends and family, then friends of friends. The money keeps flowing in because existing clients are seeing great returns, at least on paper." After thanking Marcus for his insight, I spent the afternoon creating a timeline of Logan's firm, noting when new funds were launched, and tracing the growth of his personal wealth as displayed through property purchases and lifestyle upgrades. The pattern that emerged was troubling. Each new fund launch coincided with a major personal expenditure, suggesting that client investments might be directly funding Logan's lifestyle rather than being properly invested. By evening, I had enough circumstantial evidence to be seriously concerned, but nothing concrete. I needed access to the firm's financial records or client statements to prove any wrongdoing, and those weren't publicly available. Daniel found me still at the dining table when he returned home. "Any breakthroughs?" he asked, setting down his bag of student essays to grade. "Nothing definitive, but everything I'm finding supports my suspicion. Logan's firm has all the hallmarks of a potential Ponzi scheme. Impressive reported returns, rapid expansion, vague investment strategies, and a lifestyle that outpaces legitimate business growth." I rubbed my tired eyes. "But without internal documents, I can't prove anything." Daniel sat beside me, reviewing my notes. "You know your parents might have investment statements? Your dad was one of Logan's first clients, right?" The realization hit me. Of course, my parents would have detailed records of their investments with Logan's firm. And given how proudly they spoke of his business, they probably kept those records accessible, perhaps even sharing them with friends to encourage them to invest as well. "You're right," I said slowly. "But that would mean getting access to their financial documents. I'm not sure how to do that without raising suspicions." Daniel considered this. "Didn't you say your mom asked you to help organize their home office a few months ago? You turned her down because we were busy with the patent application." I nodded, seeing where he was going with this. so I could offer to help now as a belated gesture of goodwill. It would give you a legitimate reason to be going through their papers, Daniel confirmed, though I still have mixed feelings about this whole investigation. I understood his reservations. What I was considering could be seen as a betrayal of family trust. But if Logan was operating a fraudulent scheme, the consequences of inaction could be devastating for not just my parents, but potentially dozens or hundreds of other investors. I'll call my mom tomorrow, I decided. Offer to help organize their home office as a thank you for the dinner invitation. That night, as Daniel slept beside me, I lay awake contemplating the potential ramifications of my investigation. If Logan was innocent, I would have wasted time and energy on a fruitless pursuit motivated by childhood jealousy. But if he was guilty, exposing him would cause a family rupture that might never heal. My parents might never forgive me for bringing down their golden child. But there was another possibility that kept pushing itself to the forefront of my mind. What if my parents knew? What if they had suspicions or even concrete knowledge of Logan's fraudulent activities, but chose to look the other way? Because they couldn't bear to see him fail, that would explain their unwavering support, despite the red flags that seemed so obvious to me. The thought left me cold. I'd always assumed my parents' favoritism was simply an emotional blind spot, not a willing participation in potential criminal activity. But if they were complicit in Logan's scheme, even passively, the family dynamic I'd resented all my life would take on an even darker dimension. By morning, my resolve had solidified. This wasn't about sibling rivalry anymore. It was about truth and accountability. If Logan was defrauding investors, including our parents, he needed to be stopped before more people got hurt. And if my parents were aware of his actions, they needed to face that reality too, regardless of how painful it might be for all of us. I'm going to see this through, I told Daniel over breakfast. Whatever the truth is, it's better than living with lies. As I picked up my phone to call my mother, I had no idea that my investigation would uncover secrets far more shocking than I'd imagined. Secrets that would not only change my understanding of Logan's business, but would redefine my entire perception of my family. Brielle, what a surprise to hear from you on a Tuesday morning. My mother's voice carried its usual mix of politeness and slight disappointment, as if I'd already done something to let her down. Hi, Mom, I replied, forcing warmth into my tone. I was thinking about your home office situation. You mentioned it needed organizing a while back, and I finally have some free time this weekend. Would you like me to come over and help? The silence that followed was unexpected. You want to help organize our office? The suspicion in her voice was unmistakable. Yes, I said, trying to sound casual. I felt bad that I couldn't help when you first asked. Consider it a belated thank you for including us in Logan's housewarming. Well, that's thoughtful, she said finally. Your father and I are actually attending a charity gala on Saturday, but we'll be home Sunday. Would that work? I agreed, feeling a twinge of guilt, but pushing it aside. Sunday would be perfect. I'd have access to their home office while they were present, so it wouldn't seem sneaky. But they'd likely be distracted with their usual weekend routines. When Sunday arrived, I drove to my parents' house alone. Daniel had offered to come for moral support, but I thought my mother might be more receptive to my help if I came solo. No reminders of my life choices that she disapproved of. My father answered the door, surprised but not displeased to see me. Brielle, your mother mentioned you were coming to tackle the office. Good luck. It's become quite the paper jungle in there. The home office was indeed cluttered with stacks of documents piled on every surface. My mother had always been organized with everything except paperwork, which she tended to accumulate until the task of sorting became overwhelming. This worked in my favor today. I'll start with the filing cabinet and work my way to the desk, I told my parents. Why don't you enjoy your Sunday? I'll call if I have questions about where things should go. Once they left me alone, I began methodically searching through the papers, focusing on anything related to investments or Logan's firm. It didn't take long to find a folder labeled Hartman Investment Group in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. Inside were quarterly statements dating back 3 years, as well as prospectuses for each of Logan's investment funds. What I saw confirmed my worst suspicions. The statements showed impossibly consistent returns, even during months when the market had experienced significant downturns. More troubling were the transaction records showing that my parents had invested nearly their entire retirement savings with Logan's firm, over $2 million accumulated during my father's banking career. But the most damning evidence came in the form of a handwritten note from Logan to my father, paperclipped to a recent statement. Dad, as discussed, these are the official statements for tax purposes. The actual numbers are in the separate file. Keep this between us. L. My hands trembled as I processed the implication. This wasn't just financial fraud. This was deliberate tax evasion with my father's knowledge and cooperation. I quickly searched for the separate file referenced in the note and found it in a locked desk drawer. The key was hidden in my mother's pencil cup exactly where she'd always kept spare keys. The second set of statements told a very different story. While the official documents showed steady growth, these private records revealed that Logan's funds had actually lost money for the past 18 months. The firm appeared to be paying existing investors with money from new clients, the classic structure of a Ponzi scheme. Even worse, there were records of significant withdrawals labeled personal that correlated perfectly with Logan's major purchases, including the mansion in Greenwich. As I photographed the documents with my phone, I heard my mother's footsteps approaching. I quickly returned the papers to their locations and pulled out an unrelated stack of utility bills to appear busy. "How's it going in here?" she asked, entering with a cup of tea. "Making progress," I replied, hoping my voice sounded normal. "You have a lot of old utility bills we could probably shred." She set down the tea and looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You know, Brielle, I've been thinking about why you suddenly offered to help with this. It's not like you to take an interest in our affairs." The accusation stung, but I maintained my composure. "I told you, Mom. I felt bad about not helping earlier." She lingered by the doorway. "Well, don't disturb your father's investment files. He likes to keep those in a particular order." After she left, I continued my search with increased caution. In a folder marked Family Trust, I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Documents showing that my parents had recently taken out a second mortgage on their home, which had been paid off for years, and invested that money with Logan as well. They had risked everything they owned on my brother's fraudulent business. But the final blow came when I found correspondence between my father and several of his oldest friends, actively encouraging them to invest in Logan's newest fund. My father had used his reputation and decades of banking experience to vouch for Logan's business, potentially drawing innocent people into the scheme. By mid-afternoon, I had gathered enough evidence to confirm beyond doubt that Logan was operating a sophisticated financial fraud with my parents' knowledge and assistance. The question now was what to do with this information. I finished organizing the office legitimately, creating neat files and clearing the desk of clutter. When I emerged, my mother seemed surprised by the transformation. "You've actually done a good job," she admitted, inspecting the labeled folders. "Thanks for the vote of confidence," I replied, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. My father looked up from his newspaper. "Everything all right, Brielle?" I nearly confronted them then and there, but something held me back. The evidence I'd gathered was too important to risk in an emotional confrontation that might lead them to destroy documents or warn Logan. I needed to be strategic. "Everything's fine," I lied. "Just tired from all the organizing." On the drive home, I called Daniel. "It's worse than we thought," I told him. "Logan is definitely running a Ponzi scheme, and my parents are actively helping him. They've invested all their retirement savings, taken out a second mortgage on their house, and are recruiting their friends as investors. Jesus, Daniel breathed. What are you going to do? Go to the SEC? It was the logical next step, but I hesitated. If I report this to the authorities, my entire family could face criminal charges. My parents could lose everything. They might lose everything anyway if the scheme collapses, Daniel pointed out gently. And what about all the other investors who don't know what they're involved in? He was right, of course. This wasn't just about my family anymore. Innocent people were being defrauded because they trusted my father's reputation and Logan's promises. I need a little more time, I decided. Next week is Thanksgiving at my parents' house. Logan and Vanessa will be there. I want to confront them first, give them a chance to come clean and make this right before I involve the authorities. Are you sure that's wise? Daniel sounded concerned. They might destroy evidence or flee if they know you're onto them. I'll be careful, I promised. But I need to look them in the eyes when I ask why they did this. I need to understand how my parents could be so blindly devoted to Logan that they'd participate in fraud. As Thanksgiving approached, I gathered and organized my evidence, creating backup copies stored securely online. I prepared what I would say, how I would present the facts calmly and rationally. But beneath my methodical planning ran an undercurrent of pain and betrayal that threatened to overwhelm my composure. My family had not only favored Logan throughout our lives, but had actively participated in criminal activities to maintain the illusion of his success. The golden child narrative they'd created wasn't just emotionally damaging to me. It was a fraud that could destroy lives, including their own. The night before Thanksgiving, Daniel held me close as doubts crept in. Are you absolutely sure you want to do this tomorrow? It's going to change everything you know. I nodded against his shoulder. I'm sure. The truth has been buried for too long. What I didn't say was that part of me was terrified of what would happen tomorrow. Not just the confrontation itself, but the aftermath. Would my parents finally see me clearly when I exposed their golden child's lies? Or would they hate me forever for destroying the fantasy they'd invested everything in? Emotionally and financially. Whatever happens, Daniel, whispered as if reading my thoughts, remember that your worth isn't determined by their response. You're doing the right thing, and I'm proud of you. His words steadied me. Tomorrow at our family's Thanksgiving table, the carefully constructed facade would finally crumble. And though I couldn't predict the outcome, I knew that the truth, however painful, was long overdue. Hey guys, I know we're at a crucial turning point in this family drama. I can feel your anticipation about what's going to happen at that Thanksgiving dinner. Before we continue with the confrontation, I want to thank everyone who's stayed with Brielle's story so far. If you're enjoying this journey of family secrets and long-awaited justice, please hit that like button to let me know. Are you Team Brielle, or do you think she should mind her own business? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. Now let's see what happens when all these family secrets finally come to light. Thanksgiving morning dawned cold and clear. Daniel and I drove to my parents' house in silence, the folder of evidence secure in my bag. We had agreed on a strategy. I would wait until after dinner, when everyone was gathered in the living room, to bring up what I'd discovered. That way, the confrontation wouldn't ruin the meal my mother had spent days preparing. A small courtesy that seemed important to maintain despite everything. Ready? Daniel asked, as we pulled into the driveway. I nodded, though my stomach was in knots. As I'll ever be. My mother greeted us at the door with her usual perfunctory hug. You're the last to arrive. Logan and Vanessa have been here for an hour already. Of course they had. The golden child would never be late. In the living room, Logan was holding court, regaling my father and Vanessa with stories about his recent business trip to Switzerland. He paused when he saw me, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. Little sis teacher, He called using the nickname for Daniel that had long since stopped being funny, if it ever had been. I forced a smile and accepted the glass of wine my father offered. For the next hour, I played along with the family dynamic that had been established decades ago. Logan dominated the conversation my parents hung on his every word, and Daniel and I remained politely on the periphery. So, the big news, Logan announced as we finally sat down to dinner, is that the new fund is launching next month. It's going to be our biggest yet. He looked at my father meaningfully. We're already getting significant interest from potential investors. My father beamed. Your brother's newest venture is revolutionary, he told Daniel and me. We've increased our own investment substantially. I bit my tongue, focusing on the elaborate spread my mother had prepared. The turkey was perfectly browned, the side dishes arranged with precision. Everything designed to create an image of familial perfection that matched the fiction of Logan's success. What about you, Brielle? My mother asked, her tone suggesting she was making an effort to include me. Any news with your computer work? Before I could answer, Logan jumped in. Oh, Mom, don't bother. Brielle's still at the same little company, right? Not everyone has the drive to build something meaningful. In the past, I would have let the dismissive comments slide, swallowing my anger along with my mother's dry turkey. But today, knowing what I knew, I couldn't stay silent. Actually, I said carefully, I recently sold my cybersecurity algorithm patent to one of the largest tech companies in the world. The deal closed last week. The table fell silent. My mother's fork paused midway to her mouth. You sold a patent? My father asked, sounding genuinely confused, as if the concept of me achieving something significant was incomprehensible. Yes, for 8 figures, I added, meeting Logan's suddenly attentive gaze. It turns out my little computer work has quite a bit of value. The silence that followed was broken by Daniel. Brielle's algorithm is groundbreaking. It's going to change how online financial transactions are protected. Logan recovered quickly, raising his glass. Well, look at that. My little sister's a success after all. We should celebrate. Though 8 figures is just the beginning. Wait until you see what my next fund returns. The meal continued with an undercurrent of tension. I noticed Vanessa barely ate, pushing food around her plate and drinking more wine than usual. She had been quiet throughout the evening, her hand occasionally drifting to her still flat stomach where their child was growing. I wondered how much she knew about Logan's fraudulent business. After dinner as planned, we gathered in the living room for coffee and dessert. My mother was discussing the mansion with Vanessa, going on about renovation plans and nursery designs. My father and Logan were huddled in the corner, speaking in low tones about the new fund launch. It was time. I set my coffee cup down with a deliberate clink that drew everyone's attention. I have something important to discuss with all of you. The room quieted, and I felt Daniel's reassuring presence beside me as I reached for my bag. 3 weeks ago at Logan's housewarming party, I overheard something that troubled me. I began keeping my voice steady. 2 guests were questioning the legitimacy of Hartman Investment Group's returns. At first, I dismissed it as jealousy or misunderstanding. Logan's expression darkened. What exactly are you trying to say, Brielle? I'm not trying to say anything, Logan. I'm about to be very clear. I pulled out the folder of evidence. After hearing those comments, I did some research into your firm. What I found was disturbing enough that I decided to look deeper. My father stood up abruptly. This is inappropriate dinner conversation. Logan's business is private. Is it, Dad? Because it seems like you're quite involved in it. I extracted the handwritten note I'd found. This suggests you're helping Logan create fraudulent statements for tax purposes. The color drained from my father's face. My mother gasped, looking between her husband and son. Where did you get that Logan demanded his charm evaporating? You went through Dad's private papers. That's illegal. What's illegal, I continued calmly, is running a Ponzi scheme, which is exactly what Hartman Investment Group is, according to these documents. I laid out copies of the dual statements, the record of personal withdrawals, and the evidence of new investor funds being used to pay existing clients. Vanessa made a small, distressed sound and set down her wine glass with shaking hands. Logan, what is she talking about? Logan's face had transformed from shock to rage. This is absurd. Brielle's always been jealous of my success. Now that she's finally done something noteworthy, she wants to tear me down. Classic little sister behavior. This isn't jealousy, Logan, I said, laying out more documents. These are facts. Your investment firm has been losing money for at least 18 months. You've been using new investor funds to pay dividends to existing clients while siphoning millions for your personal use. The mansion, the cars, the vacations, all paid for with other people's money, including Mom and Dad's retirement savings. My mother's hand flew to her throat. Charles, she looked at my father, her voice trembling. Is this true? My father's face had turned ashen, but he remained defiant. Logan explained the investment strategy to me. It's complex but legitimate. Brielle doesn't understand high finance. I understand fraud when I see it, I replied, turning to my brother. Logan, you've lost all of Mom and Dad's retirement money, haven't you? That's why they took out a second mortgage on their house, to give you more capital to keep the scheme running. Logan's silence was damning. Vanessa stood up suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. You promised me. You promised this was all legitimate. It is, Logan insisted, but his confidence was cracking. There were some temporary setbacks, but the new fund will fix everything. We just need a little more time and capital. That's what every Ponzi schemer says right before it all collapses, I said quietly. How many people have invested in your funds, Logan? How many friends and family members are going to lose everything because they trusted you? My father finally found his voice. Enough, Brielle. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you're going to put that folder away and never speak of this again. Logan is working through some temporary challenges, but everything is under control. I looked at my father incredulously. Under control, Dad, you're looking at evidence of securities fraud, tax evasion, and misappropriation of funds. Logan could go to prison for decades. And you could too, if you've been helping him create fraudulent documents. The room fell silent. My mother began to cry softly, looking between her husband and son with growing horror. You don't understand what you've done, my father said finally, his voice low and dangerous. Your brother has important clients, powerful people who won't appreciate having their investments scrutinized. Do you really want to be responsible for destroying this family? His words hit me like a physical blow. Even now, faced with irrefutable evidence of Logan's crimes, my father's only concern was protecting his golden child and the family's reputation. You've already destroyed this family, I replied, my voice breaking. You just don't know it yet. Logan, seeing that his charm offensive wasn't working, changed tactics. Look, Brielle, he said, his tone suddenly conciliatory. I admit I've taken some shortcuts, made some aggressive financial moves, but I can fix this. With the capital from the new fund launch, I can recoup the losses and make everyone whole. You don't need to involve the authorities. It's too late for that, I told him. I've already sent copies of all this evidence to the Securities and Exchange Commission. They'll be contacting you soon. The lie was calculated. I hadn't actually contacted the SEC yet, wanting to give my family a chance to do the right thing first. But the effect of my words was immediate and shocking. My father lunged across the room, grabbing my arm hard enough to bruise. You did what he hissed, his face contorted with rage. Daniel was on his feet, instantly pulling me away from my father. Don't touch her, he warned, his normally gentle demeanor replaced by fierce protectiveness. In that moment of chaos, Vanessa did something unexpected. She walked to the sideboard where her purse lay, extracted a USB drive, and handed it to me. Here, she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. This has everything. All the real financial records, the client list, the offshore accounts. I've been keeping copies as insurance since I started suspecting something was wrong last year. Logan stared at his wife in disbelief. Vanessa, what the hell are you doing? Protecting our child, she answered simply. I'm not raising our baby in a house built on fraud, waiting for the day the FBI breaks down our door. It's over, Logan. My brother's facade finally crumbled completely. He sank onto the sofa, head in his hands. Dad, tell them it's going to be okay. Tell them we can fix this. My father looked around the room wildly, as if searching for an escape route. Finding none, he did the unthinkable. He began to cry. Not dignified tears, but gut-wrenching sobs that seemed to come from someplace deep and broken inside him. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he gasped between sobs. Logan had such potential. I just wanted to help him succeed, to give him the advantages I never had. When the first fund started losing money, he was so desperate. I couldn't let him fail. I couldn't. My mother, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, suddenly found her voice. What have you done, Charles? She asked, her face twisted with shock and betrayal. Our friends. Our savings. Everything we worked for our entire lives. I did it for the family, my father insisted weakly. For our legacy. No, I corrected him gently. You did it for Logan. You've always done everything for Logan. As the full reality of the situation sank in around the room, I felt no triumph, only sadness and a strange sense of relief. The truth was finally out, painful and ugly as it was. What happens now? My mother asked, looking at me as if seeing me clearly for the first time. Now you all have a choice, I said, gathering my evidence. You can either come forward voluntarily, cooperate with authorities, and try to make this right for all the people you've defrauded. Or you can wait until the scheme inevitably collapses and face much more severe consequences. Logan looked up, his face haggard. There's no way out of this, is there? There's always a way out, Daniel said quietly. But it starts with accepting responsibility and making amends. We left shortly after that, leaving my shattered family to consider their options. In the car, I finally allowed the tears I'd been holding back to flow freely. Are you really going to turn them in? Daniel asked as he drove us home. I clutched the USB drive Vanessa had given me. I don't know. Part of me wants to protect them despite everything. But what about all the other victims? Don't they deserve justice too? Daniel reached for my hand. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. But remember what you said in there. The truth was going to come out eventually, one way or another. Maybe the kindest thing you can do for your family now is to let them face the consequences on their own terms before it gets even worse. The week following the Thanksgiving confrontation was the longest of my life. After much soul-searching and several long discussions with Daniel, I made my decision. I would give my family 48 hours to self-report to the SEC, and if they didn't, I would submit the evidence myself. I called my parents' house to inform them of my decision, but no one answered. After several attempts, I drove over only to find the house empty with a sold sign hastily erected in the front yard. Alarmed, I called Logan's number, but it went straight to voicemail. Vanessa's phone similarly offered no response. Had they fled, the thought made my stomach churn. If they were attempting to escape consequences, they would only be digging themselves into a deeper hole. Then on Tuesday morning, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Brielle Hartman, a formal voice, inquired. This is Agent Ramirez with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We'd like to speak with you regarding Hartman Investment Group. My heart raced as I agreed to meet with them that afternoon. When I arrived at the local FBI field office with Daniel beside me for support, I was surprised to find Vanessa already there, looking pale but composed. "I reported everything yesterday," she explained when we had a moment alone. "After you left on Thanksgiving, Logan and your father tried to convince me to run, to take what money was left and flee the country. That's when I knew I had to act immediately." "Where are they now?" I asked, dreading the answer. Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "They were arrested this morning. Your mother too, though I think she'll be released soon." She really didn't know the extent of it. The FBI interview was grueling, lasting nearly 4 hours, as I explained how I had uncovered the fraud and provided all the evidence I had gathered, including Vanessa's USB drive. The agents were particularly interested in my father's involvement and the methods used to create the fraudulent statements. "You did the right thing coming forward," Agent Ramirez told me as the interview concluded. "This scheme was already beginning to unravel. We've identified over 70 victims so far, with combined losses exceeding $15 million. The scope of the fraud was even larger than I had imagined. As I left the FBI office, the weight of what had happened and what was still to come settled heavily on my shoulders. Over the following days, the story broke in the financial press. "Hartman Investment Group, exposed as Ponzi scheme," the headlines declared. My phone began ringing constantly, with calls from journalists seeking comments, distant relatives expressing shock or blame, and even some of Logan's clients who had learned of my role in exposing the fraud. I took a leave of absence from work, unable to focus amid the chaos. Daniel was my rock fielding calls and protecting me from the worst of the media onslaught. Vanessa surprisingly became an ally as well. We met for coffee several times, both of us processing the betrayal and destruction our family had wrought. I kept hoping Logan would come clean, especially after we found out about the baby she confided during one of our meetings. When he announced the new fund at the housewarming party, I realized he was never going to stop unless someone stopped him. 2 weeks after the arrests, I was finally allowed to visit my mother, who had been released on bail pending trial. She had moved into a small rental apartment, most of her assets frozen by the court. The elegant, always put-together woman who had critiqued my life choices for decades was gone, replaced by someone who looked decades older. Her hair undyed, her clothes simple and unadorned. "I didn't know," she said as soon as I entered the apartment. "I swear to you, Brielle, I didn't know the extent of what they were doing." I believed her, though it raised different questions. How could you not ask? The lifestyle, the mansion, the sudden wealth, none of it seemed suspicious to you. She looked away, shame evident in her posture. "I wanted to believe in Logan's success. Your father always handled our finances, and I trusted him." She paused, tears forming. "I should have asked questions. I should have seen the signs." "Yes," I agreed quietly. "You should have." We sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment before my mother spoke again, her voice barely audible. "I'm sorry, Brielle. Not just for this, but for everything. The way we treated you compared to Logan, the way we dismissed your achievements. I have no excuse." The apology I had waited a lifetime to hear now felt hollow in the face of everything that had happened. Yet something in me shifted a small crack in the wall I had built around my heart. "I don't know if I can forgive you yet," I told her honestly. "But I'm here, and I'll help you through this." My father and Logan remained in custody, denied bail due to flight risk. My father's attorney reached out asking if I would testify to his limited involvement, suggesting that he was manipulated by Logan. I declined. The evidence spoke for itself, and my father had made his choices knowingly, repeatedly choosing to protect Logan's fraud rather than confront the truth. Visiting Logan in detention was the hardest. My charismatic, confident brother had been replaced by a hollow-eyed stranger in a jumpsuit. He alternated between blaming everyone but himself Me for exposing him, Vanessa for betraying him, our father for insufficient guidance, and breaking down into self-pitying sobs. I never meant for it to go this far, he insisted. The first fund actually did well, but then there were some losses and I couldn't bear to disappoint Dad. One small lie led to another, and then I couldn't stop. I listened without offering the absolution he clearly sought. There were dozens of moments when you could have stopped Logan. Dozens of opportunities to come clean before it got this bad. You chose this path. What happens now, he asked, sounding for the first time like the little boy who had once asked me to check for monsters under his bed. You face the consequences, I replied simply. You cooperate with the authorities, help them recover whatever funds remain, and accept responsibility for what you've done. As the weeks turned into months, the full extent of the fraud was revealed through court proceedings and financial forensics. Logan had indeed started with a legitimate investment firm, but when his first fund underperformed, he had begun falsifying returns to maintain his image as a financial wunderkind. Our father, desperate to believe in his son's success, had first looked the other way, and then actively assisted in the deception, using his reputation and connections to lure in new investors when the scheme began to falter. The victims included family, friends, former colleagues of my father, and dozens of innocent people who had trusted the Hartman name. Many lost their life savings. The knowledge that my family had caused such widespread pain was almost unbearable. Yet amid the wreckage, unexpected growth emerged. My mother, forced to confront reality, perhaps for the first time in her life, began to change. She sold her jewelry and designer clothes to contribute to the Victim Restitution Fund, took a job as a receptionist to support herself, and entered therapy to understand her role in enabling the family dynamics that had led to disaster. Vanessa filed for divorce, but promised to ensure that Logan could have a relationship with their child once he had served his sentence. She moved to be closer to her parents and reached out to some of the victims personally to apologize, even though she had been unaware of the fraud for most of its duration. As for me, the experience transformed my perspective on success, family, and forgiveness. The patent sale that I had mentioned at Thanksgiving was real. My algorithm had indeed been purchased for a substantial sum, but unlike Logan's fraud-fueled wealth, my success was built on years of genuine work, innovation, and perseverance. In a strange twist of irony, I found myself using some of that money to help my mother stay afloat and to contribute to the Victim Restitution Fund. I couldn't undo the damage my family had caused, but I could try to mitigate it in some small way. 6 months after that fateful Thanksgiving, both Logan and my father accepted plea deals. My father, at 68, was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Logan received 12 years with the possibility of parole after 8. The courts ordered the liquidation of all their assets, including Logan's mansion and my parents' home, with the proceeds going toward restitution for the victims. The day after the sentencing, I sat with Daniel in our backyard, watching the sunset and reflecting on the journey of the past half year. "Do you regret exposing them?" he asked gently. I considered the question carefully. "No," I said finally. The truth would have come out eventually, probably in an even more destructive way. At least this way, some of the victims might recover part of their investments. And what about your relationship with your family? That was more complicated. It's different now, I admitted. Not healed, maybe not even healing yet, but at least it's honest. For the first time in my life, my mother sees me, really sees me. And oddly enough, I think I understand my father and Logan better too, even though I can't condone what they did. Daniel took my hand. You know, most people would have been destroyed by what you've been through, but you've somehow found strength in it. I leaned against his shoulder, grateful beyond words for his unwavering support. I think it's because I finally stopped seeking their approval. When I was no longer defining myself in relation to Logan or measuring my worth by my parents' recognition, I could see the situation clearly, and once I saw it clearly, I had to act regardless of the consequences. As the sky darkened and stars began to appear, I reflected on the unexpected outcome of the family drama. The golden child had fallen, the supposed disappointment had risen, and the parents who had enabled the toxic dynamic had been forced to face reality. It wasn't justice in the satisfying cinematic sense I might have imagined in my darker moments. It was messy, painful, and incomplete, leaving damage that could never be fully repaired. But there was truth now, where there had been lies, accountability, where there had been evasion and the possibility, however distant, of building something healthier from the ashes of what had been destroyed. You know what the strangest part is? I said as Daniel and I headed inside. After a lifetime of feeling like I wasn't enough for my family, I've realized that I don't need their validation to know my own worth. And that's the most liberating thing of all. 1 year after the Thanksgiving that changed everything, I found myself driving to the small apartment my mother now called home. We had settled into a new kind of relationship. Not the close mother-daughter bond I had longed for as a child, but something honest and respectful built on the wreckage of the past. I knocked on her door, balancing a pumpkin pie in one hand. She answered quickly, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure at seeing me. "Brielle, come in, come in." I just made coffee. The apartment was modest but homey, decorated with a few salvaged photographs and mementos. The most prominent was a new family photo taken at the hospital 3 months earlier, when Vanessa had given birth to Sophia Logan's daughter, whom he had only seen in pictures and during supervised visits. "How was your visit with Dad yesterday?" I asked, accepting the coffee she offered. "Good, actually. He's teaching a financial literacy class to other inmates." She smiled wryly. "Ironic, I know, but he says it's helping him understand where he went wrong." We chatted about my work, her part-time job at the library, and Daniel's recent promotion to department head at his school. The conversation was easier now, unburdened by the pretense and favoritism that had dominated our interactions for decades. "I got a letter from Logan," she said, finally pulling an envelope from her pocket. "He asked me to share it with you when you were ready." I hesitated before taking it. My relationship with Logan remained the most complicated of all. I had visited him only twice since his sentencing, finding the experience too painful to repeat regularly. The letter was unexpectedly heartfelt, Brielle. "I've had a lot of time to think in here. Too much time, probably. I wanted to hate you for exposing everything, but the truth is you saved me from myself. The longer the scheme went on, the deeper I was digging my own grave. I was so obsessed with maintaining the image of success that I lost sight of what real achievement looks like. I see it now in you. You built something real, something valuable through your own talent and hard work. I never had the courage to fail honestly, to admit when I was struggling, to ask for help without manipulation. I'm trying to learn that courage now. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. But I wanted you to know that even though my actions proved otherwise, I always admired you. Your integrity, your resilience, your quiet determination, qualities I pretended to have but never truly possessed. Take care of Mom, and if someday you could tell Sophia about her father, not just the criminal but the brother, who loved building forts with you when we were kids, who taught you to ride a bike, who once punched Tommy Watkins for making you cry, I'd be grateful." "Your brother Logan," I folded the letter carefully, unexpected emotions swirling through me. The brother Logan described from our childhood had been real before our parents' favoritism had warped him, before he had learned to value appearance over substance. "He's changed," my mother said softly. "Prison has clarified things for him." "I hope so," I replied, not yet ready to fully believe in Logan's transformation. Time would tell whether his remorse was genuine or simply another performance. As I drove home later, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The family that had defined me for so long, their expectations, their comparisons, their uneven love, had been irrevocably altered. The golden child narrative had been shattered, and with it the limitations it had placed on all of us. My father was facing the consequences of his choices, finding purpose in warning others against the path he had taken. My mother was building a new identity beyond being Logan's champion and my critic. Logan was confronting hard truths about himself without the cushion of privilege and favoritism. And I had finally stepped out of the shadow of being the disappointment, embracing my own definition of success. The damage could never be completely undone. The victims of the Hartman Investment Group fraud would never fully recover their losses despite the restitution efforts. My family would never be the idealized version I had longed for as a child. But there was a certain justice in the truth being revealed in the facades crumbling in reality, replacing illusion, however painfully. As I pulled into my driveway, Daniel was waiting on the porch, his smile a reminder of the genuine love and support I had found despite my family's dysfunction. Inside our home, modest compared to Logan's mansion but earned through honest work, was everything that truly mattered: integrity, truth, partnership, and peace. The journey had been brutal, exposing family secrets and betrayals I could never have imagined. But standing in the aftermath, I finally understood that sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you deserve, and that creating something better, something real, requires the courage to face the truth no matter how uncomfortable it might be. And that perhaps was the most valuable lesson of all. So, that's my story, everyone. I'm curious, have you ever had to stand up for what's right, even when it meant confronting your own family? Or have you experienced that moment when you realized your worth isn't defined by someone else's perception? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to join our storytelling family, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that they're enough exactly as they are. Thank you for listening to my family revenge story. Remember, sometimes the most important life lessons come from our most painful experiences. Until next time.